How did George Armstrong Custer become a name recognized around the world? He was, of course, a brave and distinguished Civil War general, but many Civil War generals, equally brave and distinguished, have been forgotten. It was his unexpected death at the Battle of the Little Bighorn and what followed that catapulted Custer into the realm of myth. News of the disaster on the Little Bighorn hit America in the midst of the 1876 Independence Centennial celebration. Some newspapers heralded Custer as a Christian knight martyred in the cause of civilization. The military verdict was less favorable, however. General Phil Sheridan wrote, "I feel it was an unnecessary sacrifice due to misapprehension and a superabundance of courage." President Grant pronounced, "I regard Custer's massacre as a sacrifice of troops brought on by Custer himself that was wholly unnecessary, wholly unnecessary." Custer's immediate superior, Colonel Samuel Sturgis, the commanding officer of the 7th Cavalry, wrote that Custer was a brave man, but a very selfish man. He was insanely ambitious of glory. He wrote that Custer was tyrannical and had no regard for the soldiers under him. Sturgis accused Custer of making his attack recklessly, earlier by 36 hours than he should have done, and with men tired out from forced marches. Concerned that Custer was being made the scapegoat for the failures of the Army and Grant administration, Custer partisans, and especially his widow, Elizabeth "Libby" Custer, launched a campaign to protect Custer's reputation. 6 months after the Little Bighorn, Frederick Whitaker's A Complete Life of General George A. Custer was published. Whitaker's book made no pretense to objectivity. This was a canonization which presented Custer as a dashing and brilliant military leader abandoned by his lesser and disloyal and treacherous subordinate officers. Whitaker writes, "Much of Custer's success has been attributed to good fortune, while it was really the result of a wonderful capacity for hard, energetic work and a rapidity of intuition which is seldom found apart from military genius of the highest order." Whitaker continues, "Few men had more enemies than Custer, and no man deserved them less. The world has never known half the real nobility of his life, nor a tithe of the difficulties under which he struggled. It will be the author's endeavor to remedy this want of knowledge, to paint in sober, earnest colors the truthful portrait." Libby Custer found success as an author. Her 3 books, Boots and Saddles, Following the Guidon, and Tenting on the Plains, recount her life with Custer on the frontier. Elizabeth Custer paints a human portrait of Custer as boyish, as the soldier's friend, and as a man devoted to his mother. Elizabeth Custer was widowed at the age of 34 and spent the next 57 years until her death in 1933 glorifying and defending her husband's reputation. Libby Custer's efforts notwithstanding, it was a new art form, the Wild West show, that burned Custer into the public imagination. The greatest Wild West showman was Buffalo Bill Cody, who once scouted for Custer. In Cody's reenactment of the Battle of the Little Bighorn, Custer and all his men are killed. After Custer is dead, Buffalo Bill rides in, but is too late to save the day. Cody avenges Custer by killing and scalping a Cheyenne warrior named Yellowhair, declaring, "This is the first scalp for Custer." The crowd went wild. In June 1885, Buffalo Bill hired Sitting Bull to perform in the show. Sitting Bull donned full war regalia and rode a lap around the arena, sometimes to the jeers of the crowd. In addition to a full schedule of national tours, Buffalo Bill's Wild West show toured Europe 8 times between 1887 and 1906, including 2 command performances for Queen Victoria. The 1887 tour included over 300 performances and sold more than 2.5 million tickets. Buffalo Bill was not alone in propagating the Custer myth. Pawnee Bill and many lesser entrepreneurs also regularly reenacted Custer's death for the public. Just as Wild West shows were losing their popularity, enterprising showmen turned to an emerging technology to tell their story. In 1912, the first film depiction of the Battle of the Little Bighorn was produced, entitled Custer's Last Fight. Custer's Last Fight was, at that time, the most expensive motion picture ever made. The 1912 picture was refurbished in 1925 with additional footage. The New York Motion Picture Company boasted that the film featured 1,000 soldiers and 1,000 Indians and that the film is a perfect reproduction of the most heroic incident in the nation's history. The expanded silent film was released in 1926, the 50th anniversary of the Battle of the Little Bighorn. By the 1940s, the talkies dominated the movies, and the third highest grossing picture of 1941 was They Died with Their Boots On, starring Errol Flynn as a brave and roguish George Armstrong Custer. Showmen were not alone in propagating Custer's fame. In 1884, the artist Casley Adams completed a painting he named Custer's Last Fight. The painting was sold to the owner of a saloon in St. Louis, Missouri, where the picture was prominently displayed. The brewer, Adolphus Busch, acquired the painting and the saloon in 1892 when the saloon owner went broke. Busch commissioned lithographs based on the painting to be used as advertising. The first advertising prints appeared in 1896. There were 18 subsequent editions with over 1 million copies produced. These lithographs were prominently displayed in bars and mom-and-pop stores throughout the country well into the 1960s and are still widely sold on the internet.